You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Justin?
It's been a nice week.
Good. Oh, I don't feel like if we went back, how many times when I've asked that, have you been able to say that sentence?
Yeah, certainly not as many as I would like.
Yeah, tell me about it. What's been good about it?
Well, we're out of the heat wave, which,
Nice.
I mean, that's
Good.
fantastic. But the weather stayed really nice. It's actually, I don't know the last time it rained here, which is
That's weird.
not necessarily all good, but it's been nice. But our blueberry bushes are ripe.
Oh.
And so, like, one of Sarah's favorite things, like, all year is, I mean, she loves summer. Her, like, symptom-wise, she does better in the summer,
Okay.
which is great. But, yeah, she loves going out and picking blueberries. So, like, every evening after dinner, we've gone out for, maybe just 15, 20 minutes or something. And Mosey's out there with us,
Yeah.
picking berries. And it's a very, like, kind of ordinary, simple kind of thing, but it's just part of just being able to do something so, like, just a normal thing together is just a really special thing.
Sounds dreamy, actually.
So, like, that, we've been, eating dinner on the deck outside. And yeah, it's just been a nice week.
Good. Hey, I feel like, was it last year? Because I remember you talking about the blueberries in the past, but I feel like last year, was she not even able to pick the blueberries? Like, I feel like maybe her health was not strong enough at that point. But I feel like I remember you saying something she was looking forward to, but really wasn't able to do it as much as she wanted to. Is that true?
That certainly sounds right. I mean, I know that over last year, she was certainly declining as the year went on. So that would, that seems to check out. And so, then this year, her feeling so much better. It's just been a real treat.
Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, that's great. And you just wonder, like, would you, I think that's one of the things I have come to realize in the hard stuff that I've gone through is like, it's those kind of moments. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it's those kind of moments that you just appreciate.
For sure.
That everybody else might just be like, oh, blueberries, dog, whatever. But like, when you have years and times that you can't do that, when you are able to, and everybody's healthy enough and the stars align that works, like I've just learned to not take those moments for granted.
Yeah, it's just magic.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's awesome. That's awesome. Good.
How has your week been going then?
Well, we went on our big trip.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So I think maybe after you get back from your trip in a couple of weeks, we can unpack all of the what's it like to be a caregiver on vacation. Last time we talked about before vacation, because it's a lot. I will say it's also a lot to be a human on vacation when a human has been in her house for like 16 months.
Yeah, that certainly would be a challenge.
So it was all delightful, and being away from our house and our puppy for 9 days and being with other people for 9 days was a lot.
Yeah.
Maya always talks about her social battery. She's like, Mom, I've been a 5% for a lot of days. Yeah. And I'm like, I know. Me too. Just got to keep on going. So I'm really fortunate. I remember you asked me last time about like, did I have to go right back to work? And fortunate that I got to take days off after the vacation as well.
That's great.
Because man, I had a big old like vacation hangover. I kept being like, why am I so tired? But then I was like, well, there's a lot of reasons, including the driving. So, I mean, that's a piece that like Sean used to drive a lot, but these days just sort of being in the world makes him tired.
Yeah.
And also I was thinking the other day, he's on like all kinds of medications that probably if I read the label say you shouldn't be driving. Yeah. So in total over the 9 days, we were in the car for 25 hours. Oh. And I drove 24 of those hours. Oh. The last day we drove all the way home in one fell swoop and it was 10 hours. And I just hit a moment where I was like, I just have to close my eyes. And so he drove for an hour and okay, here I go. So yeah, I think that something I've been thinking about is like sort of the dichotomy between being like the sick one and the healthy one, and the driving piece sort of like that really hit home for me this time because I think it was the first, we haven't gone on a big trip in a couple of years, but it was the first trip where I felt like, he could maybe drive, but I feel like I should. Right. And then that was a lot to take on. So yeah, I don't know if that's something for you, if that resonates when I say that, like the things that you can do that she can't, the things that because she can't, more pressure is put on you, or I don't know, what does that sound like to you?
Yeah, I certainly, when you mention like the sick one, the healthy one, kind of the feelings around that, that's certainly something that I, at least internally, is a kind of a constant like push and pull for me. So like kind of a recurring kind of thing, wall that I kind of come up against with a lot of things is, I may be exhausted or tired and not have necessarily feel like I have the energy for something. But with Sarah's energy being so dynamic as far as, one day to the next, what she has the energy for, there can be, and I want to be clear that it's an internal pressure that I'm putting on myself. It's not anything that's coming from Sarah or anyone else.
Yep.
But there can feel like this pressure to, I have to put how I'm feeling about this aside and not put an additional limitation on her based on how I'm feeling and not feeling like I have the energy or something for this thing. And it's a really hard dynamic. And I don't know. It just feels like there's a lot of complicated feelings I have around it, but it continues to be kind of this like wall that I bump up against. And I think it's one of the reasons that I find it hard to take initiative on my own to like take a day off and go do something on and spend my energy on that. And part of that feeds into, feeling like some guilt around being able to be the one who can go off and go do some adventure for a day as the healthy one. There can be some of that.
So not even just the like, oh man, I'm going to be gone. And then how is she going to be? But also like just this, like, she can't go. Like, I know you like to go, like you'd like to do outdoorsy things. Right. And that's probably not something that she's got the energy for. And so also just feeling like, I'm going to go do this thing she can't do. Right.
Right. And that's kind of always always in the back of your head a little bit with that. And even like with this, I've got this camping trip with my family coming up, and what didn't get touched on in the last episode when we talked about that I was thinking about this week, and is like the grief around that of, I'm going to do this family thing that she's unable to be a part of. And just kind of, it's one of those moments that sort of brings into focus our situation. It's this kind of somewhat juxtaposition a little bit of like, I talked about, we had this great week, picking blueberries and eating dinner on the deck and like how great that's been, but also feeling this grief with, I'm going to be spending this time with my family doing a thing that she's unable to do. And like with that camping trip, like she's the one that kind of put all the pieces in place to like allow me to go on that. So she's really good about like knowing that I need to spend time for myself. And, for this trip, she had the conversations with family to be like, okay, how do we, the things that Justin does that we need to, that he's not going to be able to do while he's gone, how can we divide those up? And and I'm so grateful for that part of her that is taking care of me in that way. But it's a tough spot to be when like there's such a mismatch health-wise between the two of us.
That's an interesting layer that I hadn't thought about, because we talked about like the stuff, right? Like oh man, if I'm gone, who's going to do the things? We talked about that piece. We talked about the guilt of like leaving her behind. But that's so important to like the grief of like, of course you wish your wife could be there with you.
Yeah.
Of course you wish that she could be part of that trip. And so the grieving of what you really wish it could be like, and it isn't. I think about that even on our trip that we just had, like Sean slept a lot.
Right.
And so just the grieving of like wishing that he was sitting right there and like enjoying it, and afterwards, like as we were talking about different things, I was like, oh yeah, you weren't around for that. Oh yeah, you weren't around for that. And so like logistically, like grieving, like stuff like I am driving a lot.
Yeah. Right.
And that's really hard. But you're right. That piece of like also the grief of what that means that he isn't able to do that.
Yeah. So like for me, I'll be out making memories with all our nieces and our nephew
Yeah.
who are like, individuals that she loves above,
So much.
all
Yeah.
else in the world
Yeah.
that she can't be there to do.
Mm.
And there's that joint like grief over not being part of that,
Mm-hmm.
but also the importance of like it's important for me because to make these memories because I'm that connection in this sense that they
Yeah.
have through me to her.
Right.
And so there's that, which sometimes feels like some pressure.
For sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, when you're making those decisions about like going on the trip or going to do something that she isn't able to do,
Mm-hmm.
like how do you weigh that? How do you weigh the pros and cons of like it's good for you and that it would feel, you know what I mean? But also
Yeah.
the grief and the guilt and how do you make those decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that's kind of evolved over time. I know that like early on when she was sick, I was most weekend mornings I was getting away to whether it was go up into the hills and do some fishing or something like that. Like I was getting away a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And it didn't seem that hard. And then I think there was a long middle period as Sarah was just like bedridden
Mm-hmm.
and I needed to be there more, you know,
Yeah.
because there was much less that she was able to do. And that was really the time when like my world started getting so much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like I couldn't be away to whether that's spend time with friends or go do something for myself. Like that's kind of, yeah, that time period was just became more isolating. And the more it is kind of like as you get more isolated, the harder it is to like become unisolated kind of. And so
Yeah,
it kind
for
of
sure.
went down that way a lot. And I think it probably wasn't until we like moved in here with her parents and there was two other people to kind of help with all of these
Yeah.
things. And there in that way there's a little bit less of that guilt around it because I know that I'm not leaving her home alone.
Right.
And that's made a big difference.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like there's still not, some difficulty around I want to go, do this thing, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
thing is, spend just something like spend an afternoon, just out, I don't know, by the beach or something.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's less now of not feeling like there's no one there to care for her. I think it's more of
Mm-hmm.
just being conscious that this is a thing that I can do that she can't do. And
Yeah.
the grief around that, the little bit of guilt around that, and just
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just not wanting to engage with those feelings. And so just, not doing it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes me think of, years ago in my work, there were a lot of opportunities to fly around the country.
Right.
And I always said no.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that sometimes. And I mean, fortunately, like now everything's online and that's a lot easier. But there for a while, that wasn't the case. And so there were a lot of opportunities that I said no to
Mm-hmm.
that I think I wouldn't have otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But it just felt like there's no way that I can just like fly off to Miami to do this training
Mm-hmm.
with the situation that I'm in.
Right.
And that was a hard thing too, to think about, like what might my career have looked like, or
Mm-hmm.
what opportunities might I have had if our life had turned out differently.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it was something where you truly like needed to be there with Sean, or something where it just felt like you couldn't leave? Like, was it a situation where there would have been enough like other help in those
Yeah.
situations?
I think we probably could have made it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there for a while, a little less so now, knock
Mm-hmm.
on wood, but there for a while, things were so uncertain
Yeah.
that I could not say to somebody, oh, sure, in 2 months, I can absolutely be in Miami.
Right. Yeah.
There's no way that I could feel
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so the few times that I even did do those kinds of things, I always said, I can do this for you, and I'm going to need travel insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to need you to know that like it is possible that I will have to cancel.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants that.
No.
Like, so I think it was more that just who knew what was going to happen at any moment.
Yeah.
And it just felt like I can't plan anything,
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't promise somebody I'm going to be able to do some work in a different state
right
in the future because the future was so uncertain.
mm-hmm.
So it's just that sometimes you think about these like sliding doors moments of like, I don't know if you get that movie reference, but like if you get the movie where she like catches a subway and misses the subway and then her life takes two different paths.
Okay, yeah,
But essentially, like, what are the different paths that our lives might have taken?
right
And what are the things that, like you said, our worlds are smaller. And in
mm-hmm.
some ways, like when we talked about at the beginning of, it's kind of lovely, like that you get to enjoy these moments of like a dog and a deck and your wife and blueberries. That if the world was different, if your world was different, you might not be enjoying those things, right?
Things might be too busy to, have those.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've thought that for sure before Sean was diagnosed. Like he was climbing a ladder, I was climbing the ladder. And I feel like we just would have ended up in this, like we were going to adopt 2 other kids. I feel like we would have just ended up in this like very like sort of frenzied life. And it's kind of nice that it's slow, and I think that I probably don't stop enough to sort of acknowledge, like you said, some of the grief around some of those things. A small example, we went the other day we took the dog to like a little nearby woodsy area, and pretty shortly into the walk, I could just tell that Sean was like done, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'm just really tired. I don't know why. And my legs are tired. And so we did a quick loop and then he was like, well, you can keep walking. Like, I'll just wait in the car and you and the dog could just keep walking in the woods.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, what, yeah, that's not the point,
right. Yeah.
And would I have been able to enjoy a walk in the woods with the dog knowing my husband was just sitting in the car? No.
Yeah.
And so it's like little moments like that, I think, that we probably don't acknowledge and grieve enough, just that has to kind of, I mean, that happens to everybody every once in a while, but like for us, that's always happening. And I think that even suggesting a walk in the woods and even getting there and where do we park and where's the shortest path, because that's the place where one time we accidentally took a long path.
Right.
And at one point I was like, are we going to have to get an EMS to like come into the woods? Like, how are we going to get out of here? So I think that's another piece, is just the constant thinking and planning in this smaller world that is like, is this a good time to go? Has he had enough of this? Has he like where are we, all those pieces that I don't know about you, but I know that I'm always thinking about.
Right.
And planning and wondering and, calculating.
Right. Yeah. And kind of what's coming to mind kind of through this conversation is like I wonder how, like, I don't want this all to come across like we feel like our partners are holding us back, or that for that to be the perception, because that's certainly not my perception. And I don't want, I would not want Sarah to listen to this and feel like that's the case.
Right.
Because I think that for me and her both know that that's not the situation.
Yep.
And so I think that sometimes makes this a little bit more of a difficult thing to talk about in a setting like this, because it feels like it's one of those things that if you haven't kind of experienced this sick, healthy dynamic, it's hard to kind of like get the nuance of it a little bit, I think. Yeah. And so I guess that's just kind of something I want to be conscious of.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sarah and Sean, we love you both very much.
Very much.
No, I think you're right. And I think that it's just that we have probably both built up lots of like, oh, look, this is just a lot of coping mechanisms. And so I think this is kind of our safe space.
Right.
In which to say like, and, sometimes it might feel like this or like that. I wonder if the flip side of it too is, I don't know about you, I would guess this about you, but as I feel like I spend so much time trying to make Sean's life as lovely and as easy as possible.
Yeah.
And so that might be that, like, if there's something he does want to do, like, we are going to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
We sometimes say that, like, around the house, like, he asks for so little, which is true. If he's going to ask for something, we are going to like make that happen.
Yeah.
When we were just in Indiana on our vacation, he and his brother love fireworks more than anything. And in Indiana, like, everything's legal. It's fine. And so even though the rest of us were like, ooh, we're tired and we have to wait for the sun to go down and all the things, we're like, you know what? He doesn't ask for much.
Yeah.
If every 3 years he wants to like shoot off a bunch of fireworks, that is fine.
Yeah.
But I think that there's, the give and take feels like maybe there are ways in which we're like, oh yes, of course. You want to go do that thing? Great. We'll make it happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, just this past, I don't know if it was this week or last weekend or the weekend, sometime in the last 10 days or something. Sarah's been wanting to go to Bellingham, which is our nominal city that's, 30 minutes away.
Okay.
To go to like TJ Maxx, Home Goods. She needs wrapping paper. She hasn't been able to go out and get wrapping paper. And if you know Sarah, she sends a lot of gifts. And so and having things look beautiful and everything is certainly a big part of that. So I don't think I was super like pumped up about, driving. And I mean, it wasn't a like, I don't want to do this situation. Like, it's kind of that, but like you said, we'll do whatever it takes to make something that Sean wants to do happen. Right. Like it was kind of the flip side. I don't know, flip side to that, like to this dynamic of like, okay, here's something she wants to do that I can facilitate.
Yeah.
And it's not a big ask at all.
Right.
And it's amazing how that she's in a place where we were able to just go do that. Yeah. Because it feels like a year ago she would have needed at least her walker, if not a wheelchair for a trip like that.
I mean, she wasn't even really going places in the car last year.
No.
Right?
Well, and there was nowhere to go. There was nowhere to go last year too. But yeah, we kind of went through the stores fairly quickly, but and then we got froyo on the way home because it didn't take too long. And so, but it was another one of those, like, this is a very ordinary, mundane kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we're doing it together. And that feels like the most incredible thing in the world.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I think about as we're talking is like any good spouse would be like, oh, you want to go to TJ Maxx and get some wrapping paper? It's not what I want to do today, but you want to do it? All right, let's do it. Like that's, just like any good spouse would do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that in some ways, like, because we're caregivers, we're just more attuned to the needs of our spouses.
Right.
And the fact that them asking for that, or the fact that it's something that they want or they're able to do, like we make that happen even more so than maybe if our path had been different and we were just like, I don't want to go to TJ Maxx. You go to TJ Maxx. You know what I mean? So I think part of it is just that like the whole experience has potentially made us like better spouses.
Yeah.
Who are more attuned to what our person needs and wants.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For you though, it's a little different because she can't drive, right? So like, you are also like the gateway between her and TJ Maxx.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of where some of that, like some of the push and pull comes in, is because like literally if there's things like that she wants to do that she needs me to do for her.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that you were talking about driving and the cars at the beginning, because we still have 2 cars. We still have her car from when she could drive, and that's been, I don't know, 7 years.
Wow.
And so like, especially during the pandemic, that was a challenge for me to drive both cars frequently enough to keep the batteries alive. And there were certainly a lot of times where they were completely dead and I had to charge them up overnight. But we finally, we're at a point where we're going to get rid of one of the cars because we don't need 2 cars.
Right. How was that decision?
I don't know. It was easier than I think I expected it to be.
Oh.
Like, we're getting rid of my car, which is fine. I'm very much a vehicle is like a get you to point A to B kind of thing. It's not I'm not in love with my car. Kind of thing. And so we're keeping her car, and she's always held on to it because it's kind of a connection. It's like a physical thing that's a connection to her life before she got sick.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And at this point, we're talking about, because her car's getting close to 20 years old, maybe, in the next year, getting a new to us car. And that was, I think, for her to feel okay, like letting go of that piece of her past life, I think was a difficult thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I've thought about that a lot because we, moved to this house 3.5 years ago. And so he's always been sick in this house.
Right.
And so it's kind of an interesting thing, I suppose, for you guys too, in some ways, because like that whole before life was in a different place.
Right.
I mean, same city, but a whole different house.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of feels like this is the way things are at this house, Yeah.
I think for us with that, like where we lived before, yes, we lived there before Sarah got sick, but like for her, that was the place where she was at her worst. And
Oh,
so like
yeah.
she doesn't necessarily have fond memories of that as a
Yeah.
place.
Yep.
The before
Yep.
is kind of washed out by
Yep.
those years.
Yeah.
But then coming here, and I don't know how much of it is, she grew up here and it's a familiar place or what, but like I may have mentioned it before at some point, but when we moved here, she talked about life going from black and white to color. And
Wow.
yeah, that was a
Really?
really magical kind of
Can she say why? Like, what does that
I
mean?
think she was up on the second story because
Yeah.
that's where her bedroom
Your other
was.
place.
And so
Yep.
she had like, there was the bedroom, there was the bathroom, and there was like another bedroom that,
Yeah.
sometimes she could go in there.
And that was it.
And that was kind of it. And it was, she was on her own a lot more because I was going to work. And so
Yeah.
now, there's more people around. She can, this is a single story house, so she can, get around more. And I think it was just a new setting. She was out of that, like the place where things were when she was at her worst.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we have blueberries. And so,
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh. It's making me think when you were saying about like your old place is where all those memories were. We had a situation yesterday where Sean is often seen by his oral surgeon. She checks his mouth all the time.
Yeah.
And I realized yesterday morning, like, wait a minute, we haven't seen her for a while, and realized that after the last one, like a follow-up hadn't been made. And so I just emailed her and said, hey, like, we haven't seen you for a while. Can we come in sometime?
You're just on an email basis with your medical professionals?
We are. Okay. I know. Crazy. Yes, with a lot of them we are.
Right.
So she's one of them. I just emailed her, hey, Rachel, haven't seen you for a while. And she said, actually, I'm about to have a baby any minute. Can you come in today? And I said, sure. How about 2:30? So anyway, so we went in to see her. But as we were walking past the clinic where the old clinic used to be. And since then, like so much remodeling and things have happened. But it's this different because it's like the oral surgery dental clinic. It's a different spot. And so I was walking past these doors and having this like deluge of like memories just like whoosh over me.
Yeah.
Because when he very first was diagnosed, like those were the doors we went in. That's where like when we went in for his like bone marrow transplant consultation, the valet guy like lost our keys. And and there was a while where I kept reporting it because like the valet lobby area looked like Night of the Living Dead. It was like so many people waiting for their cars, so many sick people waiting for their cars. And so this was just this building that for years we went in the door. And now the clinic has moved a couple blocks away. And so we just don't even see that spot. And so to walk past it was just this moment. And you just realize all these little moments that we just are holding.
For sure.
And memories of all the like really, really, really hard things that have happened. Because that building is also connected to the hospital. And so just like, 11 years of memories by those doors. And so just like we woke up yesterday not thinking we were even going to the doctor, and then ended up walking past this building where I was like, oh, wow, we have lived a lot of lives.
Yeah.
And a lot of them happened right there in that building, Yeah,
it's incredible how something seemingly as small as walking past a building or something like that just can bring back just so much.
So much. And then also it turned into like once we were in there in the doctor's office, of course they found a new spot and then asked him, do you want to like send pictures in 2 weeks or do you want to have a biopsy? And so he was like, he just always errs on the side of let's check it out.
Right.
Because things grow so quickly for him. But then we just like very quickly got like swooped into like a different room, and then people are like draping him, and then they're like sterilizing the things and putting laughing gas on and all this stuff. And, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah. And you woke up expecting none of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you just think about like, I don't know, just another caregiver moment of like, what's happening? What is happening?
Yeah.
And I haven't even processed yet. Like, oh yeah, now we're waiting for results. Like that's just a whole different thing. But it was just sitting there in this moment of like, I'm always in the room for stuff. So like sitting there as they're like coming at him with his like giganto needle,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there's blood and there's all the stuff. And then I'm just sitting and I'm like, what is that? What? This is not what I thought today was going to be like, you know?
Uh-huh.
So anyway, that's a little bit of a side note, but that's just sort of the caregiving experience, right?
Yeah.
Is that we just never know what the day is going to end up as.
Mm-hmm.
And that those physical spaces, like your old house or like your car, can both have, or the clinic can have both good and really hard memories that can sweep up in us, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all a lot. And yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, talking about all of this, talking about the feelings of the healthy partner versus the sick partner, being the abled partner versus the disabled partner, you know, all of that dynamic. And now a lot of those feelings for me with a trip coming up without Sarah, a lot of those just bubble up to the surface. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to be feeling a lot of various things in the time coming up. And like I mentioned earlier, up until this past week, it had all felt like logistics. And once that initial kind of like died down, that's kind of when grief started coming up. And so, yeah. And I'm beyond grateful to Sarah for feeling well enough. You know, she's been feeling better. So she's like at a point where she wanted to be able to take over more of her infusion. So that's something that she can do more of now. And for her to be able to do some of this coordination for me. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of that happens that I don't necessarily pick up on sometimes.
A lot of what?
Of her like caring for me in those ways. I think when you get stuck in the like I'm the caregiver kind of role, I don't know that I always notice those, but I know that that's a big part of why I'm able to keep going.
Yeah.
Is those ways that she's, you know, as she is able to like keep an eye on me.
Yeah.
Which is really sweet.
Absolutely. I think that both of us are rare in that we have pretty incredible spouses.
I would agree.
That even though this is like super, super hard, we actually really like each other.
Yeah. Right.
You know, and I just want to acknowledge that I know that everybody has marriages that feel like that feel supportive and healthy with or without caregiving.
Right.
But I think that you and I are both really fortunate that we do. And so that, yes, we have these hard things and there are things that we grieve and there are things that feel hard. And we have blueberries in the backyard.
Yes.
You know, we have those things. And so I think, and, you know, I don't typically like to bright side things, but I think that sometimes when I think about the path that we may have gone down without this diagnosis, I think there's a lot of like busyness and just, I don't know. I think that there's a lot that we would be missing out on if we had not slowed down in this way. I'm not saying that like I don't wish that Fanconi anemia doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
Clearly. But I'm saying that there are definitely pieces that, and I think appreciation for each other is one of those pieces for sure that comes out of this.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm glad though that you can feel, I mean, I think that when you said the thing about the logistics, I think that I often get just sucked into logistics or I throw myself into logistics.
Right.
Because that's an easier headspace to be in. And so I'm glad that you were able to, you know, first of all, it's impressive that 2 weeks before your trip, your logistics are figured out. That's amazing. And that you know, now have the space for the other things as well. The other feelings. So, yeah. Well, I think that by the time I talk to you next, you will have gone on your trip.
I think so.
I'll be anxious to hear how that went. And we can maybe both talk about what it was like on the trips, you without and me with, and kind of the ways that all worked out.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, I hope that there are many more blueberry deck dog days.
Yes.
In your future.
Right. And I hope things are can stay a little bit calm over there as well for you.
Thank you.
As much as possible.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for talking.
Yeah, you too.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.